All right, well, I have two favorite places to be. One is next to my fireplace with a good book, a glass of wine, and total silence in the background, which is rare at my stage of life. And the other is in a room like this, speaking to women about big, bold, brave ideas. So thank you so much for having me. You know, people have asked me, I hate public speaking. Don't you get nervous when you get up in front of an audience and speak? People have asked me, you know, aren't you nervous? And I don't know if you know this or not, but according to the Book of Lists, public speaking is actually the #1 fear. Most people would rather face death than get up in front of a group and speak. But I've always said, you know, actually, and I'm using my college degree. I got a communications degree. But that's only half the story. It was the spring of 2015 when, with just a handful of family in the audience, I got up in front of 250 strangers and told them my deepest, darkest secret. I was at a beautiful new theater in San Antonio, Texas, participating in the Listen to Your Mother talk. And the room echoed with silence as I stepped up to the podium and said, "Hi, my name is Christina, and I'm a recovered anorexic perfectionist." The room echoed with silence. And I remember being so grateful in that moment that the blindingly bright spotlight made it impossible for me to actually see people's reactions. After I was done with the talk, I remember walking off the stage and thinking, what did I just do? Why did I even do that? Does anyone even care what happened to me when I was a teenager? But you know, I've heard it said that the truth will set you free. And standing on that stage, publicly revealing my eating disorder story for the very first time brought me a freedom that I had never known. Telling the truth means standing in the light instead of in the darkness. How many of you can relate? I was honored to find out that hundreds of women were inspired by my revealing that story, and that they found some sort of meaning in that type of courage. But what was interesting is that it also left me somewhat lonely. Friends that I had known for almost a decade started treating me differently. Somehow they felt like I was now broken or fragile. Some of them wanted to know all the details. How much had I weighed at my very worst? What had caused me to become anorexic? And some asked if I had pictures. Can you imagine? But for a little while, it was like this new information had defined me. Like the Christina they had known was gone, and now there was only this recovered anorexic perfectionist in her place. What I noticed at the time was that most people wanted to watch or follow as they became inspired, but they didn't want to get too close. As I started sharing this more and more and more audiences, why do you think this is? Why do you think we would rather watch someone's journey to courage, but keep at a safe distance? Well, I think I figured it out along the way. In my experience, not many people regularly and boldly tell the truth. And in fact, we women are actually socialized to do just the opposite. Don't be so loud. Don't be so bossy. Don't be so dramatic. Sit still. Stay pretty. Does that resonate with any of you? Most of us play along, but what if we don't? Well, based on my experience, we can be isolated, right? Or we can be admired from a distance, but often not joined. And then, have you ever noticed that there are times when some people become so uncomfortable with our newfound courage that they actually start to throw stones and try to pull us back, like there's this circle that we're supposed to stay in? Right? There's an abundance of research proving that we are hardwired to be connected as human beings. Most of us will do almost anything to secure this sense of belonging. It's one of our most primal needs. By show of hands, who in here is in a book club? A sewing club? Who is in a sorority or some type of group in college? Right? This is what we do. We create smaller social circles to feed this need of belonging. And really, there's nothing wrong with this. But sometimes we create belonging by drawing battle lines and pulling and pushing each other to one side or the other. We experience this as women all the time. We show support on the outside, and then sometimes we walk away secretly judging, criticizing, or even gossiping about that person. And sometimes we do this because we're trying to validate that the way we're doing something is the right way to do it. Let's play a little game. If you have your purse within reach, your purse or your bag, just pick it up real quick, take a look inside. Maybe a direct reflection of how many people you had to get out of the house this morning, right? Just take a look inside. All right, you can put it down. Now, raise your hand if you would love for me to ask you to give me your purse, and I'm going to show everybody what the inside of your purse looks like. Yeah? Are you okay with that? Okay. Who would be a little bit embarrassed? Yeah? I put mine out of reach because there's no way you guys are getting near that thing, right? But the truth is there are probably women in this room that have Cheerios and diapers and snacks to feed their little ones later. And there may be women in this room that have a neatly organized bag with business cards and pens within reach. Somebody in this room might have spent weeks organizing to just be here and be in the company of other women. And some of us might be happy that we made it out of the house with matching shoes, right? There's probably a woman in here with a Pinterest-worthy pantry. I would like to talk to you later, by the way, because that is not me. But there are other women who have laundry baskets that have anything but clean clothes in them. You know, this is just the reality of where we are. But how many of us have ever looked at another woman and thought, man, she looks so good and put together all the time. How does she do it? Maybe we've looked at her and thought, well, I could look that good if I had all her money and all the help that she has. All right. Or maybe we looked at our friend and we thought, well, who does she think she is to show up at the potluck without anything? I had to run around town, but I brought my crock pot, right? We do this all the time. But I wonder what would happen if we looked at that friend who always looks so perfect and put together and we said, I wonder if she knows that we don't care if she showed up in a ponytail and sweats. We just want her to be here, right? Or if we looked at our friend that didn't bring anything to the potluck and we thought, I wonder what happened today. I'm so glad that she's here and she didn't have to go home and worry about cooking later. I hope everything's okay. What would our lives be like if we just started operating from this position of us and not we, they? And we really started looking at it as a group. What if our connection to one another is what brings meaning and purpose to absolutely everything on this planet? What if our connection to one another is the closest thing that we'll ever get to experiencing that perfect connection that we'll finally feel when we get to heaven? That might be what this journey is about. Have any of you ever felt totally and inextricably connected to another human being? Like that person just gets me. Maybe it was a time that you went through something traumatic. Maybe it was the time that you had your first child. Maybe it's your spouse. But can you think of a moment where you really, truly felt deeply connected to another human being? If you would for just a minute, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Just take a minute, take a breath, close your eyes, and go to that moment for just a little while. Visualize, where are you? What do you see? What's around you? Where were you in that moment in time? Who's there? What do you hear? What are you saying? What is the other person saying? What are the sounds that you hear in this moment? What do you feel? What do you feel right now, revisiting this moment of deep, authentic connection? Go ahead and open your eyes. Who wants to raise their hand and share a feeling, maybe just one word that you felt when you revisited that moment of connection? Okay. Yes.
Peace.
Peace. Peace.
Love.
Love.
Safe.
Safe.
Gotten.
Gotten. Gotten.
No.
Yeah. Gotten. Known. Does someone?
Lucky.
Lucky. Lucky. Yeah. Friendship. Peace, love, known, gotten, lucky. How many of us would like to feel that way more often? Yeah? Anyone? It looks like you guys have a pretty good connection here in this room, and there are some really meaningful relationships. But what I know from my experience is that we are better together, and that moments like the one that you just recreated can be made at any time. The moment that I revisited was sitting in a bakery back in San Antonio, where I'm from, with a friend that I met about 9 years ago, just after the birth of my first child. We met at a crawfish boil. Do y'all have those here? Do y'all know what that is? Crawfish? Okay, yeah. My husband is Cajun, so I have a... Oh, there you go, Baton Rouge, yes. So anyway, we met at a crawfish boil, and it was one of those times where you just click right away. And so we knew that we were probably going to be friends, or that we were at least going to see each other again. But it really wasn't until one evening that she invited me over to her house, and we sat outside in her patio, and over a glass of wine, I started to share with her why I was such a worried and anxious mom, because I was a worried and anxious mom. I started to share with her that my brother had had a car accident my sophomore year in high school that had left him brain dead and in a coma. In that time, everything in my life was out of control. He was 2 years younger than me. I have another sister that's 7 years younger than me. And I remember sharing with her that I was a dancer. We actually shared that. And dancers can never be thin enough. And suddenly, food became the one thing that I could control in a completely unpredictable and painful world. I remember telling her how, even though I had spiraled out of control with the anorexia during this time, I had still managed to excel in school and my theater program, and I had actually gotten into my dream school, NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. And I was overwhelmed with the idea of getting to go. But at the end of that summer, my dad took me and we visited, and I saw the dorms where I would live in the Big Apple, and then my parents came to me and said, "You can't go. You're too sick." And I remember telling her about the way I had to actually spend the first part of my college experience in and out of an outpatient program at Texas Children's Hospital, while my mother drove me back and forth weekly to Texas A&M so that I could try and start college. I shared with her all of those feelings of pain and fear and inadequacy. And what was interesting was she didn't blink an eye. She listened, she honored my story, and she held space for me. It was the first time that I had ever shared the details of something like that with anyone outside of my family. It felt lucky to be known and to be heard. I felt loved. I felt like I had just shown somebody the ugliest, most disgusting part of me, and they were willing to touch me anyway. It was a beautiful, free moment. Anyway, this friend and I went on to host each other's baby showers, and we spent almost every weekend together. We lived really close, like we could practically ride bikes to each other's houses. It was awesome. We were both corporate career women at the time, and we had so much in common. Then a few years later, I had my twins, and the world kind of turned upside down, as you might imagine. I went from the mother of one to the mother of three overnight. She had just become the mother of one after years of struggling to have a baby. I was navigating my departure from corporate America, and she was climbing the corporate ladder. So you probably know where this story is headed, right? We began to drift a little bit. And eventually, my family decided to move across town to be closer to the family that we had. And we went weeks and sometimes even months without seeing each other. We tried to stay connected through phone calls and texts and all of the things that you do, but we just weren't able to be as close as we once were. And then my twins were about 1 year old, and I got a phone call from her, and she said, "Will you meet me for lunch today?" And I said, "Yeah, awesome. Let me just make sure I can get somebody over here." So I had a babysitter for the twins, and I was so excited to go see her. We don't have this restaurant here. It's called La Madeleine. I think the closest one is in DC, and it's awesome. So if you know anybody in the business that's looking to start a franchise, that's a good one. But anyway, we met at La Madeleine, and as soon as I walked in, I was so excited. I had actually, brushed my hair and put on mascara. That was something I hadn't done in a really long time. And I went in, I was so excited to see her, and as soon as I saw her, I knew something had changed. She had lost weight, her hair was pulled back in a sleek but strained ponytail, and she had dark circles under her eyes. So we got our coffee, and I sat down, and I think I started talking about the kids or something light to just lighten the mood. And she looked up with tears in her eyes, and she reached across the table, and she said, "He's having an affair. It's been going on for months, and I don't think it's the first time." And I didn't know who else to call. My head was spinning. I was so angry. But as mad and as sad and as shocked as I was in that moment, I knew that what she needed from me was not a barrage of questions. She needed what she had given me so long ago on her patio. So I breathed deep, and I held her hand, and I listened, and I cried, and I offered space for her to share that new, terrible truth. When you share something that you are deeply afraid of or that fills you with shame and fear, the way someone responds can make all the difference in the world, can't it? I'm gonna switch modes. Have you ever gone to Target and seen a mom completely lose it? Yeah. I'm talking about like yelling, threatening, leave her cart in the middle of the aisle, lose it. I hope none of you shop at my Target because you might have. Okay. Luckily, I wear hats usually when I'm shopping in Target. But when we see that happen, have you ever wondered in that moment, what is going on? Can't she just keep it together and get the kids to the car and handle that at home? Or worse, why can't she control those kids? And these small and large judgments about each other are everywhere. It's hard to know who to trust sometimes. But I've shared a little bit of my story with you today, and I'm sure that you have your story. The woman sitting next to you, I bet she has one too. The truth is, we cannot know a woman's story based on her Instagram story or her Facebook page. We don't know what it took for that mom in Target to just get up and get out of the house that day. We don't know what phone call she might have received on the way there that left her raw and scared and vulnerable. But if we showed up in this room with this group of women on this particular day, chances are that we have what it takes to persevere when life throws us curveballs. In fact, I dodged 4 curveballs this morning. I decided to get a puppy the same year that I sent all 3 children to school. So that's a talk on sanity for another day. We'll save that for later. But there's a name for walking through the mud and the muck with the scars and the "you will not defeat me" attitude to show for it. And it's called grit, an indomitable spirit. TED speaker Angela Duckworth says that grit is more important than either talent or intellect to our success. And as Winston Churchill says, when you're going through hell, you just keep going, right? As I mentioned, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. I'm the oldest of 3 children, and I play the big sister role to a T. But there have been times in my life that I wish I had a big sister who could sort of help me along the way that I think I encourage and help my siblings. Someone to make me laugh, maybe at myself and not take myself too seriously, but mostly just to share her experience and wisdom with me. And recently, I've had an opportunity to get to know a woman who I consider my surrogate big sister. I met Haley about, 6 months ago now. She's about 15 years ahead of me on the journey. She has 3 grown children, and I have 3 young children that are growing. We laugh sometimes because our stories make it seem like they're almost matching in their experiences. Oftentimes, I start to tell a story, and Haley knows right where I'm going because she's already been down this path before, right? Well, Haley and I are doing some very important work together related to women that inspires us and that we're both very passionate about. And we decided that when we started working together, one of the things that we were going to do was use our relationship to model the type of relationships that are possible for women. So we had a meeting set up for an early week in January. You all remember January? I'm referring to it as the winter apocalypse because it was not fun for any mom of young kids or anyone else for that matter who likes to leave their house, right? But we had a meeting set up, and all of a sudden I needed to rearrange it because I had a chance to get my daughter in to see an immunologist at VCU to be tested for a very rare condition. We've been trying to figure out what's going on with her for months, and that's a story for another day. But anyway, I had just gotten the call that we could, in fact, get in to see this doctor. And so I had this meeting on my calendar. And I don't know how any of you are, but my calendar on my phone, not my written calendar, not the chalkboard calendar, but like the phone, my phone that nobody else gets access to, I guard that calendar, right? I really treasure that time with her. And so I was really torn. That might seem silly because I really did need to get my daughter into this immunologist, but I didn't want to reschedule the meeting. So I called Haley and I said, listen, here's the deal. I got her in, Dr. Zal has this opening, it's overnight, she's gonna be tested, but I think we can get it all done and I'll just take her and then I'll get her back to school and I can still meet you, I just might be a few minutes late. And what do you think Haley said? No. She said no, because she's been down this path before. She said, you need to go and you need to go see that doctor and you need to be with your daughter and don't you worry about it, we'll have our meeting another day. Well, anyway, that's what I did. I went, and my daughter actually has been diagnosed with a condition called PANDAS. That's another story for another day, but some of you might have heard of that. And it was a very important meeting that allowed me to start treatment for her that has been awesome and fantastic for our family. But I felt really kind of upset and frustrated that I had missed this meeting. And most of all, I like to do what I say I'm going to do. I'm one of those people, right? I am admittedly too busy. If you open up my computer screen, much like my brain, there are always 22 tabs open. I'm a doer. I like to do things. So when we finally had our meeting, almost 3 weeks later, I said, Haley, I am so sorry. I can't believe I had to reschedule. And you were so understanding. Thank you. And she stopped me in my tracks and she said, Christina, all I want to do right now is be the woman that I wish had been there for me when I was in your stage. And that really struck me. It struck me. How often do we feel like we find those people who are being the women that we wish we could have been in our moments of difficult times? So, what's interesting about that story is that it's not really unique to me, is it? Haley and I are a lot like you, or a lot like the women next to you. We've been through the mud and the muck, and we've earned our grit by owning our stories, honoring the pain, and deciding to show up and write our next chapters courageously. It's available to every one of us. But to show up in the world wholeheartedly in support of other women the way that she did requires something called grace. Grace. And what I've learned from my relationship with Haley is that grace given is grace received. When my first child was born, I was unprepared in all the ways that every new mother is unprepared. I had no idea about the profuse amount of bodily fluids involved. I did not know how to breastfeed and quite frankly wasn't sure I wanted to, and I had no concept of how tired a person can actually be, right? Anybody with me? Doesn't matter how long it's been, does it? You can always remember. You could always remember that. You know, most of all, I didn't take to motherhood in the way that I thought I would. My dad is one of 7 children. My mom is the older sister of 2. I knew I wanted to be a mom my whole life. And suddenly I had this baby, and I did not gaze into his eyes and feel crazy love and peace. I felt crazy, but absolutely no peace. I did not instinctively know how to calm him, and I felt totally and completely inadequate. I met my friend Tricia just before Alex was born. I think I was waddling into a service organization about this big, and she had a son that was almost 3 at the time, and so she was set up to be my mentor in this service organization. And she was laid back and really easy to talk to and kind of the opposite of everything I am. She's petite and just really chill and all that. And I remember telling her, I am just so inadequate and I just don't feel like I know how to do this. I am not good at anything. And I would later find out that I actually was suffering from postpartum depression and anxiety, which is not surprising given my previous experiences with anxiety. But in that moment, she knew nothing about my story. She didn't know about my family trauma in my teenage years or my eating disorder or anything at all. She just looked at me and said, you know, this is one of the hardest things you're ever going to do, but it's also going to be one of the greatest things you're ever going to do. But right now, you need rest. Can I just hold your baby? And she just took my baby and she just held him. And I remember that feeling. Part of me was angry. Why was he so calm in her arms? And part of me was like, oh, I can't believe someone's willing to carry this load with me, because that's what it felt like at that moment. We didn't know anything about each other. Over the next 10 years, I got to know a lot more about Tricia's story. And that's her story to tell, it's not mine. But what I can tell you is, that is a girl with grit. You talk about trudging through mud and muck, she has had her share of mud and muck. But she is filled with more grace than anybody I know because of that. She's my very best friend. She's now the godmother of one of my twins. And she inspires me to be the woman that she was for me in that moment. It's experiencing grace from people like Cara and Haley and Tricia. It's what changed me. Very honestly, it changed me to my very core. It brought me closer to God. It brought me closer to my children, closer to my husband. And it's what led me to ultimately found an organization called Richmond Moms Blog. This is a local organization that aims to inspire and encourage moms to embrace the journey of motherhood. You know, every mom's transformation, dare I say that word, into motherhood looks different. You know, mine may look a little bit messier than yours, or mine might look like a walk in the park compared to yours. But what most of us share in common is we experience the need to have a tribe of women around us, helping us to trudge through that mud and muck as we get really, really gritty, and also to share in those moments of grace when we need them. So this is, as I said, a local organization. You can find us on Facebook, and our website is rvamomsblog.com. But we've got more than 3,000 moms currently here in the Richmond area who are just in it to encourage each other, to lift each other up, to share stories, to laugh, to cry. Because if we can't do that with other women, where can we do it? You know? So, what would the world look like if we all started to approach it this way? If we approached it from a position of us, and not we, they, not me, you, but we looked at it, and we all were in this together, getting gritty, and what if every minute that we were tempted to judge another woman, we looked at her and just offered her grace instead? Harriet Beecher Stowe said that women are the real architects of a society. And I believe that that has never been more true than it is today. We have all it takes to be filled with grace and with grit and to show up with the world every day, show up in the world with courage to bring about the positive change that we need to see in our world today, to show up and love someone that feels unloved, to show up and invite someone in who doesn't feel like they belong. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of my story with you. My hope is that each of you will leave here today inspired to be the woman that you wish had been there for you. Thank you so much.